Picture this, it's a cold winter night in Lisbon, 1666. The royal palace sleeps beneath a shroud of silence, its candlelit corridors flickering like dying embers. Outside, the Tagus River glistens beneath a crescent moon, but inside the queen's chamber, the air is thick with shame. Curtains drawn, a young bride lies awake, her heart pounding louder than the church bells outside. She's 16, radiant and terrified. Beside her lies a man, her husband, King Afonso VI of Portugal. But he does not move. His eyes stare blankly at the ceiling, his hand twitching faintly. The wedding night, meant to seal love and dynasty, becomes an echo of humiliation. The king cannot perform his duty, not out of refusal, but out of ruin. His body, ravaged by childhood illness and neglect, has left him half paralyzed and impotent. That night marks the beginning of one of the most tragic royal unions in European history, a marriage that lasted 13 years without ever being consummated. It's a story of pride, political decay, and a king whose broken body mirrored a crumbling throne. A kingdom led by a man unfit to rule, or to love. Before we can understand this marriage, before we can grasp how a kingdom once filled with promise came to be ruled by a man both broken and betrayed, we must step back. We must trace the path of a boy born into privilege yet doomed by frailty, of a court that mistook weakness for sin, and of a love story that never truly began. You stand in the shadow of Lisbon's ancient palace, where Afonso's story begins long before the crown ever touches his head. Born in 1643, Afonso was the second son of King João IV, a monarch hailed as Portugal's liberator from Spanish rule. But while his father rebuilt a nation, the young prince's body was falling apart. At the age of 3, Afonso suffered a violent fever, likely encephalitis or meningitis, that left one side of his body paralyzed. His right arm hung useless, his leg dragged, and his speech slurred. Doctors called it a stroke from God. Courtiers called it a curse. As he grew older, his mind became unstable. He lashed out in violent fits, tortured servants, and even attacked those who mocked his weakness. The royal court hid him away, whispering that the young prince was possessed. Yet beneath the madness was a boy drowning in humiliation, a child who would one day be crowned king, yet never learn what it meant to be a man. A king's body broken before his crown was ever placed. In 1656, when Afonso was just 13, his father died. The throne passed to him, though everyone knew the truth, it was his mother, Queen Luisa, who ruled in his name. Portugal was still fragile from decades of Spanish domination, and the court feared what would happen if Europe saw their king's deformities. For years, Luisa governed wisely. But Afonso's temper grew worse. He spent nights gambling, drinking, and ordering his guards to beat courtiers who dared to look at him. His tutors abandoned him, priests called him unfit. When he turned 18, he seized control by force, imprisoning his mother and declaring himself absolute ruler. The boy who was once pitted had become dangerous. But in his eyes, power was proof of manhood, and marriage, its ultimate validation. In 1666, an alliance was forged through marriage. France sent a beautiful noblewoman, Marie Françoise of Savoy, only 16 years old, to become the new Queen of Portugal. Her portrait arrived in Lisbon before she did, pale, delicate, elegant, the perfect royal bride. The Portuguese court hoped she would steady their unstable king. But what awaited her was a nightmare. On her wedding night, Marie Françoise found herself lying beside a trembling, half-conscious man. His right side was limp, his breath ragged, his eyes vacant. The young queen wept silently, realizing the truth before anyone dared speak it: the king could not consummate the marriage. Days turned into months. Priests blessed their bedchamber, doctors prescribed tonics and prayers, and servants whispered about the king's failure. In time, the truth became impossible to hide. Portugal had a virgin queen. A royal marriage built on silence. By 1668, Portugal's courtiers began to turn their gaze toward another man, Afonso's younger brother, Pedro. Calm, intelligent, and healthy, Pedro was everything his brother was not. He handled affairs of state, while Afonso hid behind palace walls, consumed by paranoia and humiliation. Marie-Françoise, abandoned and humiliated, found comfort in Pedro's presence. Their bond grew, first in shared duty, then in whispered confessions, and soon, in forbidden affection. To the court, it was both scandalous and inevitable. When the queen confessed to a priest that her marriage had never been fulfilled, the church ruled that her union to Afonso was invalid. Within months, the Pope himself annulled it. The reason given was simple, yet damning: impotentia regis, the king's inability to perform. When news of the annulment reached Afonso, he flew into a rage. He demanded his brother's arrest, his wife's imprisonment, and the Pope's excommunication. But his words carried no weight. The court, the church, and even the army had already turned to Pedro. In November 1667, Pedro staged a bloodless coup. Guards stormed the royal palace, seized the king's chambers, and took him away under the guise of protection. The once feared ruler was stripped of his crown and sent into quiet captivity at the Azores, never to return to Lisbon again. The same year, Queen Marie-Françoise married his brother, the man she truly loved, in a ceremony the church sanctified. Portugal rejoiced. The shame of a failed king was buried behind palace doors. The throne replaced him. His own blood betrayed him. For the next 2 decades, Afonso lived as a ghost. Confined to a remote fortress, he wandered its corridors muttering to himself, half mad, half aware. Letters from foreign ambassadors describe a man who had become a beast, speaking little and eating with his hands. The once proud monarch had been reduced to a pitiful shadow of his former self. No wife. No power. No dignity. He was forbidden to see his brother or his former queen. When he died in 1683, aged 40, few in Lisbon even noticed. His death was recorded quietly, with no funeral procession. Within days, his brother Pedro was crowned king, the title Afonso had once fought so desperately to keep. You stand now in the ruins of Afonso's life and wonder, was he truly the villain history remembers, or just a man broken too early by fate? His failure was not just of body but of compassion, a kingdom that prized perfection more than humanity. In the corridors of power, love and pity are luxuries. Kings are not allowed to be fragile, and weakness, physical or emotional, is a death sentence. Afonso's tragedy reminds us that in the world of crowns and bloodlines, even a king can become disposable. Centuries later, modern medicine would reveal that Afonso's illness, likely a combination of encephalitis and cerebral palsy, could have been treated. His paralysis, his cognitive issues, his violent impulses, all products of a world that punished illness with exile and mocked deformity as divine punishment. Even now, echoes of Afonso's story remain. We still live in a world where power hides behind image, where failure is silenced, and where empathy is mistaken for weakness. The story of the impotent king is not just a scandal of the past, it's a warning about how societies destroy those who do not fit their image of strength. History's cruelest prisons are not made of stone, but shame.